welcome to Voices of the Prophets, Book of Ovadyah, class number, I don't remember, 13, 14, 15. Anybody know? Anyway, it's in the title, 14. Welcome. We have in the studio Abigail, Colin, Martin, Bree, Tim Flanagan, and Sandy Bassey. I see in the YouTube comments Liz is here. There are 5 people watching on YouTube. This class is brought to you by the Seattle Kollel, seattlekollel.com, SEATTLE, KOLLEL.com. Visit their website and consider making a tax-deductible donation to support Jewish learning and programming for the Jewish community in Seattle, Washington, a beleaguered Jewish community. Maybe I shouldn't say that. Okay, we now have Lisa in the studio and 8 people watching on YouTube. Phenomenal. What are the announcements? Support the channel by becoming a channel member for the price of a coffee. That's what people say. For the price of a coffee each month, you can support this channel with your membership. You'll get perks like early access to new content. For example, this live stream will become members only for 1 week following the broadcast. In addition, the YouTube shorts that I try to put out on a semi-regular basis will come out about 1 day early for members. And if you'd like to support the channel in a more substantial way, there are donate links in the video description. You can also support by shopping ArtScroll at artscroll.com/Rebbe Rafi, REBBI Buy the best in Judaica items that there are on the market, and you can support the channel with a commission at the same time. Okay, we are ready to jump in. Anyone wants to make a question or comment at any time, you are welcome. I'm just going to add to the screen the slides, I guess. Boom. Okay. Look at all those people in the studio. Amazing. We'll switch the view up. Okay. So last week, we learned verse number 17. Verse number 17, which read... Here it is. Yeah. And upon Mount Zion there shall be a remnant, and it shall be holy, and the house of Jacob shall inherit their inheritances, talking about the end of days. And we made many comments about it. Check out the class. But we said basically we referenced, based on the commentary of the Malbim, these passages in Isaiah 66, verses 7 to 9, talking about 2 stages of the redemption. One which would come before the birth pangs, the so-called birth pangs, and one which would come with the birth pangs. And that is before there would be a remnant. So the remnant in chapter 17 is this small population that begins to return to the land of Israel slowly, gradually, prior to this great period of pain. And the great period of pain, the book of Isaiah tells us, will affect the entire world simultaneously. And it's that pain that will bring about a so-called birth of the nation of Israel, or a rebirth, which will be the redemption, when Jews worldwide will experience this pain, which will cause them to return to the land of Israel. And as he says, just like a woman comes to the birthing stool, the travailing chair, to give birth, and she experiences pain, but it's followed by a birth, so too this pain of the Jewish people will be followed by a birth. Okay, now we're up to verse 18. Any questions before we begin? Okay, we will go ahead. It reads as follows. Oh, let me put on my laser pointer. Got on my laser pointer. V'haya veis Yaakov eish uveis Yosef lehava uveis Esav lekash v'daleku vahem va'acholum v'lo yisorid leveis Esav ki Adonai diber, which means as follows: V'haya veit Yaakov eish, and the house of Jacob shall be a fire. Uveis Yaakov, Uveit Yosef lehava, and the house of Joseph shall be a flame. Uveit Esav lakash, and the house of Esau will be as straw. V'dalekuvahem, and they will ignite them. Va'achalum, and they will consume them. V'lo yiyes sarid leveit Esav, and there shall not be a sarid, a survivor of the house of Esau. Ki Hashem diber, for Hashem has spoken. Okay, any questions on that translation? Oh, we have Jana. Jana joins us. Hello, Jana. Welcome.
Hello.
Okay. Any comments on just the plain translation? Questions? Okay. We'll proceed to look at some commentary. All right. We have the commentary of Rashi. Rashi makes an interesting comment where he says, Ki Hashem diber, for Hashem has spoken. V'heichan diber, where did God speak this? Said God spoke. Okay, so tell me, where did he speak? And he quotes a verse in Numbers chapter 24, verse 19. V'yerd mi Yaakov. And how does he translate? Out of Jacob shall come a ruler. Okay, it's an acceptable translation. V'ha'avid sarid. And he shall destroy sarid. Again, that's the word we have in this verse. Verse 18, V'lo yes sarid. There will not be a sarid of the house of Esau. I translated here as a survivor. This translation of Rashi, which I didn't produce, this is from Sefaria, says, him that remains. Sarid is him that remains. Okay, I like survivor. And he will destroy a survivor. And this abbreviation here is sort of, it's like an ellipsis for the rest of the verse, which he does quote in the translation, in the city. He will destroy the survivor. Doesn't say in the city, it says from the city. Okay. Now in the English, he adds a citation that Rashi is quoting these two midrashic sources. I considered looking at those sources and I kind of abandoned that plan, but we'll see where the evening takes us. But I will visit the passage in Numbers that Rashi does cite.
Can I make a comment, please?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I love about Yaakov being the fire, because I think of that as the source, and fire, Aish, being Torah. And
wait,
then
fire Aish being what?
Torah.
I'm not sure what you're saying.
Torah. Aish is Torah is compared to like
Torah,
fire.
Torah, yeah. Got it.
And then Yosef being the flame, I look at it that like power.
Mm-hmm.
The flame from the fire.
Okay. Fine, accepted. Let's take a look at this passage in Numbers that Rashi is quoting. Now, the section here, I would even, if I had my druthers, and I do have my druthers because I'm in charge here, but there were different stages of my preparation. So I think I made this slide, and then later I kind of considered maybe looking at something else. So maybe we'll peek at Sefaria. But Rashi's quoting verse 19, I think, over here. I put, to add context, the verse that comes before it. What's the larger context is this is the section in the portion known as Balak. In the Torah portion of Balak, you have Balak is the king of Moab, and he hires a sorcerer, a diviner, to come and curse the Jewish people. His name is Bilam in Hebrew. In English, it's Balaam, Balaam, for some reason. In Hebrew, it's Bilam. So Bilam attempts to curse the Jews, and as we know, God puts blessings in his mouth. He's unable to curse the Jews. He's forced to bless the Jews. So I want, before we're tempted to look at verse 18, let's actually look at verse 17. So I'm going to switch tabs for a second. Okay, here's Sefaria. I'll make it larger. Okay, we'll do 200%. So he's pronouncing these prophetic blessings upon Israel. And one of the things he says, going back to verse 17, he says, Erenu velo ata. It means I will see him, but not now. Ashurenu velo karov. Ashurenu is another word for seeing. I will see him velo karov, but not literally close, meaning not soon. What I'm going to tell you now is something in the future. Very famous passage. Darach kochav miyaakov. A star shall march forth, if you will. Darach, like the Hebrew word derech, meaning a path, means to like walk. A star shall march forward from Jacob, but also it has the connotation of like trampling. As it's going darach, it's like patting down the ground and flattening out its way. So the star will come forth from Jacob that will sort of forge a path. Vikam shevet mi Yisrael, and the rod shall. Now, shevet, some of you may know, is the word for tribe. So Vikam shevet mi Yisrael. Here he puts a few translations here in the Sefaria. Rod, staff, branch, offshoot, scepter, club, tribe. Okay, we'll explain the connection between tribe and rod, etc. But it says Vikam shevet mi Yisrael. It either means a tribe will arise from Israel or a rod will arise from Israel. The idea of a shevet, it's basically synonymous with the word for branch, like mateh is a staff. As everyone knows, that Moshe had as everyone knows, Jews are familiar with this, that Moshe had a staff. Moses had a staff, and Hebrew it's called the mateh. A mateh is a word that means a staff. It also means a branch of a tree. A synonym for that is shevet. Shevet means a branch or like a staff, because it's kind of like the branch of the tree. It's a stick. But it also refers to a tribe, because a tribe is a branch of a larger nation. So you have like the trunk of the tree is the nation, and it branches out into individual tribes. So tribe, the word for tribe is the same as the word for branch, is the same as the word for rod or staff, okay? Either shevet or mateh. Both words are used to mean both rod or tribe, okay? So a rod or a tribe will arise from Israel, tribe, rod. Umachatz pa'ate Moav, it will strike the corners of Moab. Vikarkar kol b'nei shet, and it will do this verb, karkar, to the, here, ignore this Safari over here. What does it say? Storm a wall, batter, destroy. Okay, I guess he's attempting to translate this, but I'm going to show you a different translation. Doesn't matter so much. We could go with it. It's not really significant. If you want to say batter, destroy, it's not what Rashi says, but it's not so material. Kol b'nei shet, all the children of shet. Now, who are the children of shet? The children of shet are synonymous with humanity, because if you'll recall, you have Adam has two sons, Cain and Havel, Cain and Abel. Cain murders Abel, and Cain's seed are wiped out in the flood. But Adam and Eve, Adam and Chava, have a third son named Shet, Seth, okay? Shes, Seth, Shet. And from him comes the line that leads to Noah, and from Noah comes all of humanity. So the children of Shet mean humanity. The Karkar kol b'nei Shet is going to subdue, if you will, all of humanity. So, okay. So the introduction here in the book of Numbers is Bilam is talking about a future time where a star will come forth from Jacob or a rod from Israel, and it will beat down Israel's enemies. Now, Moab is singled out here because it was Balak, the king of Moab, who hires Bilam, the sorcerer, to curse Israel. So rather than curse Israel, essentially, he curses Moab. He says, no, you Moab are going to be destroyed. And also all of humanity, essentially. Now, again, it doesn't mean that all of humanity is going to be destroyed, but defeated by this star or this rod. Now, who is that? Let's look at Rashi for a simple explanation. Okay, he says, he says, okay, the Kam Shevet, there will arise a rod. He says, Melech Rodeh u'Moshel. Look at his language. Melech Rodeh u'Moshel. Now, Moshel means to rule. A king will rule. But Rodeh, you'll recognize this root from our verse not from our verse, from Rashi's commentary that we just saw in Ovadyah, over here where it says V'yerd mi Yaakov, and he says there will be a ruler from Jacob. So yerd, this verb, the Reish Daled verb here, Radak, has to do with ruling. Okay, so let's look again at the passage in Numbers. So there'll be a Melech Rodeh, Umoshel. There'll be now Rodeh and Moshel are like synonyms. They mean to rule. There'll be a king that's going to like subdue. Rodeh has more the connotation of subduing. Okay, subduing and ruling. Okay, and then what comes next? Then we have verses 18 and 19, which we'll look at in the slides. That's what I had in the slides. Okay, so what does verse 18 say? It says, V'haya Edom Yeresha. And you remember this word Yeresha from, we'll go back a little bit to verse 17, which we looked at the beginning of the class when we were reviewing, is what does it say? It says, V'yareshu Beit Yaakov, the house of Jacob will Yoresh, will inherit a Morashehem, their inheritances, as it were. So, going back to here, verse 18, and Edom will be Yeresha, will be an inheritance, right? Because we spoke about last week that Israel is going to conquer not only their own lands, but as Bree pointed out last week, and as we're going to see in the next verse in Ovadyah, which ironically is 18:19, just like we're looking at Numbers 18:19. Not saying there's a connection, but it's interesting that where it says explicitly that we will inherit the land of Edom. So Edom will be an inheritance. V'haya Yeresha Seir Oyavav. And Seir, which is the mountain where Edom dwelled, will be an inheritance. Now it says Oyavav, which according to Rashi, you could read this two ways. Seir Oyavav, Seir, his enemies, which it could mean Israel's enemies who are in Seir will be an inheritance. But Rashi understands it slightly differently, that Seir will be the inheritance of its enemies, that Seir's enemy will inherit it. And Rashi says, who is that? Israel. Who is the enemy of Edom? Who's the nemesis of Edom, of Esau? It's Jacob. Jacob will inherit Esau. Okay, and that's explicit in Ovadyah. V'Yisrael osechayil, and Israel is doing chayil. We talked a lot about the word chayil, which here I translated as strength, although, and we talked about why that is, why chayil could mean strength. It means like a mass of something. It could be a mass of possessions. It could be a mass of people. It could be a mass of ability. So strength. But even the Targum, I think, I looked at the Targum here, says Israel will oses, to do, to act. Chayil means that Israel is going to get a lot of possessions. And again, it refers to, according to the Targum, receiving back our inheritance that was taken from us. Or in this case, the inheritance of Edom, which to a certain degree was promised to us. And remember, just a reminder, what we spoke about last week, that Abraham was promised in Genesis 15, the land of 10 nations. But when Israel comes to their promised land, it's repeatedly called the land of 7 nations, and it only lists 7 out of the 10. And we said, what happened to the other 3? And Rashi says in Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 5, that 3 lands were given to Abraham's seed through Moab and Ammon, which are the seed of Lot, his nephew, who inherited him for reasons we discussed. And Esau got the land of Edom. But in the end of time, and we mentioned in the previous verse 17, Moab is going to be no more. And Edom's also going to be no more. So who's going to get those lands? The children of Israel. This will be more explicit in verse 19 of Ovadyah. So, good. And then what does it say in verse 19? V'yerd mi Yaakov, there shall be a ruler from Jacob. Literally means, and he will rule from Jacob. Doesn't say who, but there will be a ruler from Jacob. V'ha'avid sarid me'ir, and he will destroy a remnant from the city. One moment, please. Sorry about that. I had to respond to something in the home of importance. Okay. Oh, by the way, you like my background? We said the house, right? The fire will ignite the house of Esau. Okay. So he'll destroy a remnant for this. Okay. What is going on there? So we'll see. Now, let me pause here for questions. Any questions in the studio so far or comments?
Yes, please.
Hmm?
I'm just wanting clarification because I'm thinking a few things. And the Yosef, I'm thinking maybe Mashiach ben Yosef.
Okay. Hold that thought.
Okay. And then I'm also, isn't Mashiach the one? I'm not sure if it's Yosef or David that captures those other three that we didn't take out those enemy. You see what I'm asking?
You're saying the three lands?
Yeah, those
You're
three.
asking, will it be Mashiach ben Yosef or Mashiach ben David?
Yes, thank you.
Good question. Why don't we hold that question? Because I didn't get to that part of the verse yet. Is that fair? Okay, in the comments on YouTube, we have, I thought married Naamah as a descendant of Cain. That is correct. That is correct. Meaning the seed of Cain wasn't totally obliterated in the flood. Naamah, who was it the sister of Lamech? I don't remember the genealogy exactly, but Naamah was married to Noah, so that the children of Noah, which is humanity, are also partially descended from Cain as well. But primarily, we generally look at the father, and that's why it's called the children of Shet, the children of Seth. Good question. Trey Bishop says, I just pulled up Mount Seir on Google Maps, and it doesn't seem like a very nice place to inherit. Maybe there's something valuable under it. Okay. Hold that thought. Okay. Let's go on. So the next slide, Rashi's commentary over there in the book of Numbers. He'll destroy the remnant of the city. Okay. This translation comes from Sepharia. It says, what city are we talking about? The most important city of Edom. It says city. It singles out one city. Why is it singling out one city? And this is pretty consistent throughout the Torah and the prophets, that there's a city that is highlighted as the city. He says, and that's the most important city of Edom, and that is Rome. It is of the King Messiah that he is thus speaking, of whom it is said in Psalm 72:8, and he shall have dominion, vayerd, same verb, vayerd, from sea to sea. Vayerd miyam ad yam. Okay, vayerd miyam ad yam. From sea to sea. And there shall be no remnant on the house of Esau. And right there in Numbers, Rashi is quoting our verse in Ovadyah. There shall be no remnant of the house of Esau. So this is also a reference to Rome. Now, again, when we talk about the city of Rome, the way I understand it is that's a reference to sort of global Rome, the Roman civilization, which the city of Rome is the emblem of that civilization. Okay, now, fine. Now here I have the commentary of Radak. You'll excuse me for not putting the translation in because I was kind of running short on time and I was rushing a little bit. So I'll just tell you what he says here. Now he's commentating on the fact that it says that the house of Jacob will be a fire. Okay. So he's really commenting on the whole verse. Just remember the verse. And the house of Jacob will be a fire, and the house of Joseph will be a flame, and it will ignite them and consume them, and there shall be no survivor from the house of Esau. So he says, just like the fire consumes straw, so too will they consume them and destroy them. And that which it says, the house of Jacob and the house of Joseph, he says these words, Kafal ha'inyan b'milot shonot. Oops. Kafal ha'inyan b'milot shonot means he repeated the same concept in different words. It says, Ki Beit Yaakov Nikra Beit Yosef, because the house of Jacob was called the house of Joseph from the day that the kingdom was split. As people who know Tanakh and people who know history, that the kingdom of David, which ruled over all the tribes, split in the days of his grandson Rechavam, the son of Solomon. Was split between the southern kingdom, which was the kingdom of Judah, that included Judah and Benjamin, with the northern kingdom, which were the other so-called 10 tribes. It's not really 10 tribes, because the tribe of Simon, was sort of enveloped within the tribe of Judah. So presumably, unless they all migrated, they were still in that territory. So it would have been 9 other tribes. Okay, and that's if you include 2 of Joseph's sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, as 2 separate tribes. And of course, the tribe of Levi was scattered among all of the tribes. So you had Levites as well, just like we have today, Levites and priests, Kohanim, among the Jews today, who are the descendants of those people. And the kingdom of Judah was exiled by Babylonia, while the kingdom of Israel was called, which was the northern kingdom, was exiled by Assyria. And that's where we have the concept of the lost tribes, because the Tanakh describes how they were scattered to many different cities, and we no longer know where they are today. We could talk a whole class about the lost tribes, but I don't want to go there. But that's the concept. So once the kingdom was split, so the kingdom of Israel was synonymous with the house of Joseph, because the primary tribe that was not in the kingdom of Judah, the kingdom of Israel, was the tribe of Joseph. Not only because it was the largest tribe, it comprised 2 tribes, arguably 3, because Manasseh was split into 2, and their territories were in 2 different areas, one on the west side of the Jordan, one on the east side of the Jordan. They were the most numerous, but also because Joseph was the firstborn of Rachel. So he was considered like firstborn and therefore due kingship. And the kings of the kingdom of Israel were from the tribe of Joseph. So therefore, the kingdom of Israel was synonymous with the house of Joseph. He says, but la'atid, in the future, tashuv achat, they shall return to being one. So Bri asked last week, what about the return of the 10 tribes? Radak says that this verse, which is talking about the house of Jacob and the house of Joseph, is a reference to the return of the 10 tribes, or the so-called 10 tribes. I'm telling you, it's not really 10, but the so-called lost tribes, the kingdom of Israel, the house of Joseph, will return. How will they return? Hold that thought. And he says, V'rabotenu zal, and our sages of blessed memory, darshu, they expounded and they said, darshu, like they taught a midrashic teaching. Ki zachar Yosef, why does it mention Joseph in this verse? Lefi she'ein zar'o shel Esav nofel el biyad Yosef, which we mentioned last week. The seed of Esau shall only fall to the seed of Joseph, or, in the hand of Joseph or the hand of the seed of Joseph. So only Joseph can defeat Esau. So it seems that we'll need the return of the house of Joseph in order to defeat Esau. Why that is, too much for this hour. Like I said, I'm referencing to you again my class on Parshat Vayetze. Go to my playlist tab on my channel. Go to the playlist called Torah Talk Weekly Parsha. Go to the class on Parshat Vayetze. You'll see why Joseph is what's called in the language of the sages Sitno shel Esav. Sitno from the word Satan. Sitno means Hasatan shelo, literally his Satan. Joseph is the Satan of Esau. What does it mean, the Satan of Esau? Satan in Hebrew, Satan means adversary. The adversary. Joseph is the adversary. That's all it means. It just means adversary. It doesn't mean devil. It doesn't mean evil. It just means adversary. Joseph is the adversary of Esau. Okay. Why? You'll have to check it out over there. I mean, we could spend the rest of the hour on it if you want. Maybe we will. But first, let me get through verse 18. Okay, I want to look at Malbim now. Any comments on what I said so far? Comments or questions? Linda Hill says, Shalom, Rabbi, and chat. Okay. Let's keep moving. Interrupt me at any time. Okay, Malbim's commentary says this. This verse that's talking about the house of Jacob shall be a flame. A fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, is the war of Gog and Magog. Or it's not that it is, but it's referring to something that will occur during the war of Gog and Magog. And remember, last week we talked about Malbim's commentary that he said the remnant on the Mount Zion that's the initial return of a small group of Jewish people before the great pain. Now, what's the great pain, the great worldwide pain? That is the war of Gog and Magog, okay? And that is when it's going to bring the full redemption about. Now, so he says that the war of Gog and Magog is going to occur. Remember, we said at the very beginning of the series, about class 3, I know that's not the very beginning, but the first 2 classes were about the person Ovadyah. The third class was about essentially an overview of Edom. And we said that Edom, in the biblical view, it's an emblem for Western civilization. And according to the Malbim, Gog and Magog, this coalition of nations that's going to go to war with Israel in the end days, is led by Edom, and therefore Edom can be a reference to the entire coalition of nations. Okay, so Edom and Gog and Magog, he says, are used kind of interchangeably and synonymously as well. He says, and then the house of Jacob will be a fire. But he says like this: what's the difference between a fire and a flame? This is the Malbim style. He parses out synonyms and says each one has a nuance. So we have fire and we have flame. We have the house of Jacob and the house of Joseph. So there's the house of Jacob, which will be a fire. That means a fire, haboer mikarov. A fire burns in close proximity. Okay, the fire is the heat. Well, it's not the heat. The heat extends from the fire, but the fire is the heat source. Okay, so the fire means fighting conflict that's going to take place in close quarters, going into the fire, into the heat source itself. So the house of Jacob will be fighting mikarov, he says, from up close. What does that mean? I'm not sure. Maybe it means in the land of Israel. The fighting that will take place in the land of Israel will be the house of Jacob as a fire. But the house of Joseph will be lahava, will be a flame. What's a flame? He says, haboer mirachok yoter min ha'esh. It burns further than the fire. In other words, the flame like sort of flickers forth and spreads from the fire. From the heat source comes the flame. Okay, so the flame is gonna fight further away.
Could this also be like October 7th?
Okay, what do you mean? Elaborate.
How the war in Gaza started in Israel and has gone to many other places.
Globalize the Intifada.
Oy.
And by the way, God forbid, and by the way, what happened in the last week? They started globalizing the Intifada. We had 2 Israeli embassy staff murdered in an attack in New York by a guy screaming "Free Palestine." You know, lo aleinu, these things shouldn't come upon us.
And the Intifada has its origin in 1933 in Germany. Hello.
Is that so? How so?
Yes.
I mean, obviously 1933 in Germany is Hitler, but what does that
Right. This is where it started. I read on it. Thank you.
Okay. So maybe, that could be. Maybe, and like a raging fire, it's sort of spreading out to the world. I want to...
Including a lot of European nations now, like England and France and even Canada are going crazy.
Yes, the liberal governments of these Western nations are turning on Israel in a aggressive way, unfortunately. Hashem should protect us. Liz has a comment. She says, last week, Jeremiah 49, Persia, young ones of sheep wipe away Edom. Okay, good. How can it be house of Joseph and Persia too? Okay, good. Trey Bishop says, if Joseph doesn't know he is Joseph, how do you identify him? By his achievements? In other words, you want to say what? That if Joseph is 10 tribes and the 10 tribes are lost and they don't know who they are, how are we going to know? Such great questions. I want to save the answers that I don't have, but let's call the discussion.
And isn't it Mashiach ben Yosef, because he is the one has power to overtake Yosef completely and destroy him. Of Esav, Mashiach ben Yosef has the
Mashiach
power
ben Yosef. Yeah.
to destroy Esav.
Yes. Yes. Hold that thought. So I like the questions. I like the comments. I validate all the questions and comments. I want to go through the material that I prepared and then talk more about these things before we get ahead of ourselves. Okay, so continuing in the comments of the Malbim. Okay, so fire, House of Jacob, close range combat. House of Joseph, flame, combat that's further away, he says. Ki Mashiach ben Yosef ya'aseh chayil az. He says, because at that time, the Mashiach, the son of Joseph, will do ya'aseh chayil. Like we said, Yisrael oseh chayil. Remember that verse? Israel is acting with strength. So he will act with strength at that time, Mashiach, the son of Yosef. And I think it's worthwhile to pause and maybe talk about what Mashiach ben Yosef is. But hold that thought, okay? Or he says, because the 10 tribes, he even calls them 10 tribes, the 10 tribes will not all yet be in the land of Israel. They will still be far away. So it sounds like, okay, before I tell you what it sounds like, hear the words and let's keep reading. He says, and the house of Esau will be like straw. He says, a straw, when it gets haricho eish, literally means when it smells fire. But it's like when the fire just blows on the straw, yochal kash echad et chavero, one piece of straw ignites and then burns the piece of straw next to it, and that piece of straw burns the next one, and so on and so forth. Ken yovdu zeh et zeh b'milchemet Gog. So shall they destroy one another in the war of Gog. And here he references, he says, like it's clarified in Ezekiel 38, which I did not prepare. But apparently, Ezekiel 38 is a whole chapter that talks about the war of Gog and Magog, and I felt it was too much material to try to cover. He says, until there will be no survivor of the house of Esau. Okay, so now that I've said all that, let's go back to, here, I actually made it in English. Let's go back to something that some of the people said. Okay, maybe I'll just quickly look at the Abarbanel. Hope it's not too much overload. The Abarbanel says this. Also, he says at this time, the so-called lost tribes will return from their exile. And this is what he says. He says, those tribes that will return from the land of their exile that are in Assyria, from the lands of their exile that are in Assyria. Now remember, Assyria exiled the northern kingdom, the tribes of Israel. So they were exiled to the so-called lands of Assyria. Where is that? Well, it's kind of all over. But we don't know where they are today, but they could be kind of anywhere, right? And he says they're called the house of Joseph and the kingdom of Ephraim. They will be a flaming fire to burn the house of Esau. He says, because they are going to come with the nations that are coming to this war. Meaning, if you remember, we talked before, and someone asked, so I'm trying to bring it in with the comments and the questions. This is why I wanted to get to the material. That there will be a coalition of Western nations that are going to do battle with a coalition of Muslim nations over the Holy Land. So he says that Esau will be the West. But as someone asked, what about Persia? Persia is going to be the Eastern coalition. And he says they will fight against the Christians. That's what he writes. And they will consume them, devour them, as it were, so that there will be no survivor of the house of Esau. And then he quotes, just like we saw in one of the other commentaries, he quotes the sages that the seed of Esau shall only fall into the hand of the descendants of Rachel, which we said like Joseph, Rachel or Joseph. Even Benjamin is considered an extension of Joseph. Number one, because he's also the house of Rachel, but also because this is very deep, and I'm saying a lot in a few words right now. When Joseph meets Benjamin, remember he was sold to Egypt and he became the viceroy. And the brothers come to Joseph and they don't know it's Joseph. And he has them seated in front of him. And it says he seats them each one in order of their birth and according to their mothers, right? The children of this one sit together and the children of that one. And he has them seated in order of their birth. And they're astounded. How did he know who's the brother of who? Because they were half brothers of each other, many of them. And how did he know the order we were born? And he's playing this whole game of like, yeah, I have this magical silver chalice. It tells me things, he's playing with them. And it says that when he meets Benjamin, it says that he cries. Now, the Midrashim here are very, very beautiful regarding the full dialogue of the encounter between Joseph and his brother Benjamin, because it says, like I told you, he seats all the brothers according to their mothers and according to the order they were born. Where does he put Benjamin, who's the only son from Rachel? He seats him next to himself, and he's hinting the whole time, and the brothers don't get it. All the sons of Leah are over here. All the sons of Bilhah are over here. All the sons of Zilpah are over here. And he puts Benjamin next to himself.
Wow.
And he's waiting, and this is open in the verse. That's not a medrash.
I'd never even saw that before.
The verse says it. So Benjamin says, "Why are you putting me next to you?" And so he says to him, "I heard, you're the only son from your mother. I'm also the only son from my mother." He says, "I heard your mother died. My mother also died. So you're like me. We're the same, you and I. We're like brothers. You should sit with me." But then he asks him, "Do you have children?" And he says, "Yes." So he asks Benjamin, he says, "What are the names of your children?" Okay. Now I have to look this up because it's just so beautiful. I have to look up the verse.
It's 10 sons, all named for Yosef, right?
Oh, right. Very good. Very good. So he has 10 sons, and they have the most bizarre names. Let me see if I can find it, because I want to go through the names. I don't know if I'll remember all the references of the names, but let's see. Where can I find? Where does it say the names over here? Let's see. Okay. It's in chapter 46, verse 21. Let me look that up. Bear with me. I'm going off the rails a little bit. 46:21. Okay. I'm going to share this tab. You'll see it's like this. It says, Uvnei Binyamin, and the sons of Benjamin were Bela and Becher and Ashbel, Gera, Naaman, Echi, Varosh, Mupim, Vechupim, Ard. It's Ard. Okay. Very weird names. I don't remember what all of them refer to. Let me see. Does Rashi say? I think Rashi says it in the other verse where Joseph and Benjamin meet. That's not what's happening here. Here it's just listing the children who came down to Egypt. But Rashi comments, why did Joseph cry? Because Benjamin told him the name of his sons. Is it here? Maybe it's here. Here's what he says. So he says, so here the Talmud tells us the story that he asked his brother Benjamin, "Do you have sons?" He says, "Yeah." "What's their names?" He says, "Bela, Becher, Ashbel, Gera, Naaman, Echi, Rosh, Mupim, Chupim, and Ard." He says, "That's those bizarre names. Why'd you name your sons that?" And he says, well, Bella, I named him Bella because I had a brother named Joseph, and Bella in Hebrew means to be swallowed up. And he was swallowed up among the nations. We don't know where he is. He was swallowed up among the nations. Becher, the word Becher is related to the Hebrew word Bechor, which means firstborn. So my brother, I named my second son Becher after my brother Joseph, who was the firstborn of my mother. He says Ashbel, so the Talmud says, because Shiva'o El. Ashbel is from the word Shavui, which means a prisoner, and that God caused them to become a captive. My brother was taken captive. So I named my third son after my brother. Gera, he's Gera, also named after my brother. Ger means a stranger. My brother's a stranger in a strange land. Naaman is from the Hebrew word naim, which means pleasant. My brother was very pleasant. Echi was another son. Echi is from the word Hebrew word ach, which means brother. I named him my brother. Rosh, it means head, because he was like my head, my leader. He was my older brother. So I named my next son after Joseph also. Mupim, he says here, Mupim and Chupim. He doesn't. The Talmud here is not clear. It only interprets Chupim, not Mupim, for some reason. But Mupim, there's definitely a source that says Mupim is from the Hebrew word mipi. Mipi means from the mouth of. That either maybe I learned Torah from his mouth or something like that, or he learned Torah from the mouth of my father. I don't remember, but it's also a reference to Joseph. Chupim related to the word chuppah, and it's plural, chupim, right? A chuppah is a wedding canopy. I named them wedding canopies because I was not at his wedding canopy and he was not at my wedding canopy. And ard from the Hebrew word yarad, to descend, because he descended among the nations. So he says, I have 10 sons and they're all named after my brother Joseph. So when the verse says that when Joseph meets Benjamin and it says he can't hold back his tears and he runs out of the room to cry. He doesn't want to cry in front of them. So Rashi cites this teaching that it was because it was this conversation that caused him to cry, that his brother had 10 sons and they were all named for him. So why did I go on this massive tangent? Because every son of Benjamin is a reference to Joseph. So even the tribe of Benjamin that descends from the 10 sons are called the house of Joseph because every one of his sons was named for Joseph. Okay. So the house of Joseph also refers to Benjamin. That was a massive tangent. I'm really sorry.
No, it was very good. Thank you.
So let me go back to the slides. Okay, we're close to the end.
And just quickly, didn't Yosef intentionally have that silver chalice put in Binyamin's bag? And it was like a test for the brothers so that they could do tshuva because they weren't going to gang up on Binyamin to rectify what they had done with Yosef.
Yes, you're correct. However, I don't want to go so far afield to that. Let me get back to here. So what's going on over here? According to Abarbanel, he wants to say that there will be a return of the 10 tribes from the lands where they were dispersed by the Assyrians. Now, if we imagine, I'm going to drop a little bomb over here. If we imagine that they were dispersed among the nations that maybe now have been conquered by Muslim peoples, it may be that the lost tribes are among the Muslim nations or the nations in the East, meaning it seems to be what the Abarbanel is suggesting. And what even Malbim may be also suggesting is that somehow there will be maybe an awakening of the so-called Jewish identity. Jewish really means Judah. They're not the tribe of Judah. They're tribes of Israel, but just for the sake of conversation, we'll call it Jews. The Jewish identity of these peoples during this war. And again, this is Abarbanel. He makes it a war between the East and the West. And now, in Abarbanel's picture of this prophecy, the and like I told you last time with Persia, last week I told you about Persia, that the sages say that Persia are going to defeat. So someone asked in the comments, how's it Persia and Joseph at the same time? It may well be that the lost tribes are among the Islamic nations, which are led by Persia, and they will be among the adversaries against Edom. Now the question is, whose side is Edom going to be on? Israel or not Israel? It seems from the Book of Ovadyah they're going to be against Israel.
Persia is unique in that they're Muslim, but they're not Arab.
They're Muslim and they're not Arab. Not only that, but also we mentioned last week the Turks. Turkey is also Muslim and not Arab. And as I told you, the Abarbanel, looks at kind of like Turkey as the leader of what he calls the Persians. Now I've heard, based on some of the sources I'm already telling you, but I've heard from others, other scholars as well, that Persia in the material, the source material, whatever you want to call it, that we use of the sages, the oral tradition, when it's talking about the Messianic era, is a reference to Islam. Persia is like a generic reference to Islam, whereas Edom may be a generic reference to Christianity. So that there will be a defeat of Christianity by Islam, as it were, and it may be that among those Eastern nations are going to be the tribes of Israel. Now, I wanted to save some of these comments for the next verse, but I kind of also promised that I would say something about Mashiach ben Yosef. Mashiach ben Yosef is a very nebulous, cloudy concept. It's not explicit in scripture, and it's not really clarified at all in the works of the sages. It's kind of this weird concept that just pops up here and there, that there's this concept of Mashiach ben Yosef, Messiah, the son of Joseph. But based on everything I'm telling you now, that you see commentary after commentary are quoting this concept that Esau can only fall to Joseph. And the sources for that, go to my class on Vayetze. It's a very well-rooted concept in our literature that Joseph is the adversary of Esau. There will need to be some element of Joseph that's present to save Israel in the end times from the predations of Esau, and that's what's being hinted to in the Book of Ovadyah. And that force that's going to derive from Joseph, it's not clear what it is or who it is described as Mashiach ben Yosef.
Oh, excuse me. I just quickly remembered Rabbi Tovia, after the October 7th, said Mashiach ben Yosef may be a time and not a person.
Okay.
Referring to that.
So I agree with that. I'm not sure what his source for it is. I don't necessarily have a clear source for it either, but it's come my way from great Torah scholars that Mashiach ben Yosef does not need to be an individual the same way that Mashiach ben David needs to be an individual. There's no specific individual. It could refer, like you said, to an event, a phenomenon, a time period. And I heard it suggested that the state of Israel may be Mashiach ben Yosef. I don't know how that fits into this prophecy per se, but use your imagination. Now, so that's the idea of Mashiach ben Yosef. We're at the end of the hour, so let's just review, and whether or not I drop an atomic bomb before I turn off the live stream, I will decide. But let me just look at the present comments. Or does anyone in the studio want to make any other comments before I kind of summarize?
I have a question.
Yeah.
It seems from these passages that Esav, Edom, the West is going to be completely wiped out. But I thought when Mashiach ben David comes, that most people's eyes are going to be opened and they're going to turn to the God of Israel.
Right.
Only the worst of the worst are going to be left and wiped out.
Okay, excellent. Therefore, you're correct. In other words, this would be in total conflict to passages in Isaiah, which talk about and many other prophets, but very prominently in Isaiah, that talk about the universal knowledge of God, all the people of the earth coming to know God, all the people of the earth sort of streaming towards Israel to offer oblation at the Temple Mount, and becoming great supporters of Israel, etc., etc. Now, if they're all dead, they can't do that. So, the prophecies we find in as Isaiah and many other prophets are much more utopian in their view of the Messianic era, whereas Ovadyah seems to be much more of a downer, right? So therefore, there's two ways to go about it. I said, different possibilities, depending if they'll do teshuvah, if they won't do teshuvah. Zechariah talks about a third of the world being destroyed.
I think what Abigail is mentioning is like the eradication of all the false religions.
Okay, good. So Zechariah talks about the eradication of false religions, including both Christianity and Islam, are going to see the error of their ways. And in addition, we did mention in previous classes that this may be referring to the force that is coming against Israel. As far as the force of Esau that's coming against Israel, that force will be totally obliterated. But it's not necessarily saying that every person in Edomite Western civilization will die. I don't think we need to understand it that way. And if we do choose to understand it that way, I think, like you're saying, it creates a tremendous conflict between this view of the redemption versus much more upbeat views of the redemption that we find in the other prophets. So I can't tell you for sure, but I feel it's reasonable to say that maybe like Brie is suggesting, it's an obliteration of the Edomite belief system, or it's a destruction of those Edomites who fight against Israel, or maybe it's only if Edom does not do teshuvah. I think there's different ways to go about reconciling these different views from different prophets. So I don't think we're stuck. I do hear the question. I think it's a very good question, but I think we can work a way out of it. Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, so the commentary we're looking at, when was it written? Abarbanel is written around the 15th century, maybe 16th century. Again, like I mentioned, he was a high-ranking Jewish officer in the court, might have been the treasurer, in the court of Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain. But they're also the ones who expelled all the Jews from Spain in 1492. So, he left Spain at that time, and it seems that he's writing at least some of his commentary after that. Especially, you see in his commentary all the negativity that he directs towards Christianity, and that he looks at the redemption as an obliteration of Christianity. Definitely, it's hard to imagine he's writing that while he's serving Ferdinand and Isabella. This is probably a commentary that was written after the expulsion, which was at the end of the 15th century. So that's around the time that he's writing. Okay, and again, like I said, in his book, he has a book called Mashmiya Yeshua, which means the one who makes heard the salvation. And there he goes through kind of all the messianic prophecies. He has them all collected and explicated in this book called Mashmiya Yeshua. And in his chapter on the Book of Ovadyah, like I mentioned before, it's going to talk about Spain and France. And he says, and it talks about the exiles in Spain. And he's going to say, exiles in Spain, there are no Jews left in Spain. So he has to interpret that. But because he says, how could it be? Right? In his time, it was sort of inconceivable that such a prophecy could exist. But there's no Jews left in Spain means he's writing after the expulsion. So it's around the turn of the 16th century is when Abarbanel is writing. Malbim is in the 19th century. And we saw like Radak is like 13th century, Rashi's 11th century. So we're really spanning a whole millennium of commentaries. Okay.
What's your bombshell, right?
Okay, so the bombshell. What I want to, again, I'm drawing both on these comments and the questions that people are asking, is that it seems both according to Malbim and Abarbanel, the house of Joseph is a reference to the return of the lost tribes, or maybe a reference to the return of the lost tribes, and that somehow they're going to, where Israel is going to have to fight on its own land, or the house of Jacob, but the house of Joseph is going to be scattered among the nations and is going to be able to aid the people in the land of Israel from their place in dispersion at seemingly at the same time that they will be returning. Okay. Now, I don't know who that is, and I don't know how that is, but it's interesting that, like, you have all these DNA kits now, and people are all discovering, oh, I have Jewish DNA, I have Jewish DNA, I have Jewish DNA. I don't know if these people are going to suddenly become, Jew lovers and Zionists, and be able to oppose these evil forces at the time of Gog and Magog. I really have no idea. But here's my bombshell. And Trey, you're going to love this, and you probably already know this. I was just talking to someone yesterday about this. Just came up in conversation. The Ethiopian Jews are believed to be the tribe of Dan. Okay, whether or not that's true, you can argue. But you had this people isolated for millennia in Africa with a Torah and keeping Jewish law to some degree, and persecuted by their neighbors, considered different always for all these years. And the Beta Israel, they're called Beta Israel, and they were airlifted to Israel, and they've returned to Israel. And there's a belief that they're the tribe of Dan, and it's based on scholarship. Okay, you could argue. It's arguable, but let's just say there's a view like that. There's a group in India called the Bnei Menashe. Many of them have returned to the land of Israel. They were found to have Jewish customs and Jewish traditions. And again, you could argue, are they a lost tribe? Are they not? It was determined by a number of scholars that they are likely to be a lost tribe. And they have returned, many of them, to the land of Israel. Both the Ethiopians and this Bnei Menashe group, they're called the Bnei Menashe, have been required to convert to traditional Judaism because they've been too isolated for too long, and we need to make sure that they are, if not by Jewish descent, which we can no longer confirm, at least they are Jewish by law, which would be the case after conversion. So they've come back and they've gone through conversions. Now, the state of Israel has funded and supported these returns of Jewish ethnic groups from around the world, like the Ethiopians and the Bnei Menashe, for many years, because it bolstered the strength of the state of Israel by bringing more Jews into it. The more Jews you bring, the bigger the Jewish population, and the stronger position that the state of Israel is in. Until something happened. Now, what happened is that the same rabbi who's running around discovering this one's the tribe of Dan and this one is the tribe of Menashe. By the way, Menashe is the house of Joseph, Joseph's son Menashe, just saying. In India, right? Discovered in Afghanistan a group of Afghanis known as the Pashtun tribe. The Pashtun tribe. And the Pashtun tribe have Jewish names. And the Pashtun tribe have Jewish rituals. And it's very strange. And it's very likely that the Pashtun are descended from Israelite tribes.
Wow.
So what's the problem? Why don't we bring the Pashtun to the land of Israel? So there's a couple of problems. At this point, the Israeli government cut off all funding to these projects of bringing back the lost tribes. Two reasons. Number one, the Pashtun are fanatical, fundamental Islamists, jihadis that want to destroy Israel. That's problem number one. Problem number two, there are 30 million of them. There are 30 million Pashtun Muslims. Now imagine in the state of Israel where there's about 7 million Jews, and around the world there's maybe another 7 million. Now brings in an influx of a Muslim fanatical tribe, twice their number. What happens? It's the end of Israel. So we can't open the gates to the Pashtun to return to their possible Jewish roots at this time.
Right.
But
100%.
imagine a warrior clan of Afghanis suddenly awaken to the fact that they are descendants of Israelites, and coming from their place, choosing to return to Israel, would get involved in fighting the enemies of Israel. What would that look like? I don't know. But that's one thing that comes to mind for me when I think about the description in these commentaries. You have the house of Jacob as a fire. You have the house of Joseph as a flame. The house of Jacob is fighting on their land, and the house of Joseph from their exiles are fighting, and they ignite Esau like straw. So someone said, how does Persia and Joseph go together? Well, if the Pashtun, even if they're not, they don't immediately awaken to the Jewish roots, because like Brie pointed out, we have yet to see, and like the book of Zechariah says, and many other prophets, the non-Jews will awaken eventually to the error of their religions. So eventually all the Muslims will become believers in the Torah. They are now to some degree. Maimonides says the spread of Islam and Christianity is going to, in a certain way, hasten the acceptance of Mashiach when he arrives, because the concept of Mashiach has been accepted by everyone around the world now. So it's just going to take like a snap and everybody's going to flip a switch, basically. But even prior to that, if the conflict between Edom and Ishmael, which is Persia, and on the Ishmaelite side are these Pashtun guys, so who may be the house of Joseph, so then it makes sense that fighting with, so to speak, Persia, that is the Islamic Eastern world, against Edom, the Western world, is a group that identifies both as Muslim, which we said is Paras, Persia, so to speak, in quote, air quotes, and also the house of Joseph at the same time. That in the Messianic era, and I don't know how it's going to happen, but these things, like we saw last week in Isaiah, they're going to happen kind of simultaneously. There's going to be a great pain. There's going to be a global conflict. And this is going to bring about the return of all the Jews, it seems, including the 10 tribes, to Israel. So this conflict, which will include both Christianity and Islam, is going to cause a return of the tribes. Maybe I'm just giving the Pashtun as an example of one thing that's possible. We've already identified a group living in a Muslim country. It's an enormous group that very likely is one of the lost tribes, more numerous than the tribe of Judah is today, than the Jewish people as we know them today. So somehow when this conflict occurs, and they'll be, so to speak, on the side of Persia, but will also return as Jews when Mashiach comes and the truth is revealed and people do teshuvah or whatever exactly happens. I think there's going to be a lot of things happening at once.
I never heard this about the Pashtun. How
Look into it.
recent is this information?
Last couple of decades.
Okay.
Look into it. It's not like this year. Many years this has been known, but it's kind of brushed under the rug because nobody wants 30 million Afghani Muslims moving to Israel who want to kill us. You know what I'm saying? So,
Rabbi, does the word Pashtun have a Hebrew equivalent, and what does it mean?
it's hard to say. It's really hard to say, because, you know, I could look at the Hebrew word pashut, which means simple or plain, but what relationship does that have to the Pashtun people? I have no idea. So I don't know. I'm not an expert on this, but you could look into what scholars are saying about the Pashtun and their connection with the lost tribes if you want to look into that. But I hope I have kind of.
Do the Kurds have any Jewish connection, Rabbi?
I'm not aware. I'm not aware. I don't have knowledge on it. So I'm trying to bring together these different verses and commentaries, and what we see today. Again, the further forward we go, the harder it's going to be. But next week, when we see verse 19, you'll see that, again, we'll go back to seeing crossover between what the present realities is and what Ovadyah is saying. Some of it we will see in front of our eyes, and some of it we'll see not yet. And I was really going to talk more about the Pashtun next week, but somehow or other, the questions people were asking led me to, and I feel like the questions were the right questions to ask, and this really was the right thing to say in this class, because these passages are mysterious and the commentaries are mysterious. Like, what is it talking about? That the house of Joseph, like what's going on with the house of Joseph, right? So that's the fire, the flame, the house of Jacob, the house of Joseph. Oh, so I think the last thing I wanted to just to review, I think we said it, is that, again, they're going to set off some type of a process, that the fire is going to ignite a piece of straw, which is Esau, and that straw will ignite other straw, and the whole thing will be consumed. And there's a lot to say about this. The sages talk a lot about Esau, then the comparison to straw and Joseph. It's really a giant topic. Go look at that class of Vayetze. But
I appreciate that you take to heart our questions and comments and delve into that.
Well,
Thank
you know
you.
what? I think that's what a competent teacher should do, is meet his students where they are and deliver to them what they need. But what I wanted to point out was the Malbim said, if I didn't say it, I think I did, is that I did say it, is that the nations of Esau are going to turn against each other. They're going to turn against each other. The fire that's going to ignite one piece of straw, but then each piece of straw is going to ignite the other piece of straw, and the straw is going to burn the straw. That's the idea of the house of Esau will be straw. They're going to destroy themselves. They're going to destroy each other. And it's going to start with when they start up with the Jews and they fight us, the conflict that they make against the Jews is going to spread to become an internal conflict that's going to consume them from within. But again, how to exactly understand all of what's going on in this verse: house of Jacob, house of Joseph, fire, flame, straw. It's mysterious.
That reminds me of with the plague of the firstborn, and then they went to war against the other secondborn. But once the firstborn's killed, now the secondborn is now the firstborn. So they were all fighting amongst themselves, the Egyptians. It's marvelous.
It's marvelous. I mean, it's sad, it's tragic, but I want to really, it's the end of the hour, it's late. I just wanted to respond to some of the comments. Someone asked, how does Qatar fit in? I don't know. So I know Trei. The reason I said Trei is going to love, I know Trei has friends who are Pashtun, so he would appreciate what we're talking about. But he said, my Pashto friend's name is Shir Chemed. He's a Muslim and he has a Hebrew name, Shir Chemed, which means like a delightful song, beautiful song. I've got a vid on my page where he shows his version of Korban, which is sacrifice. They make sacrifices. They have Jewish rituals and they have Jewish names. They keep Shabbos in a certain way. They like maybe even Shabbos candles. They wear a garment similar to tzitzit. Very, very interesting things. Someone says Persia was not Islamic, Beth, and that's correct. And yet, these are prophecies. So Persia, what was Persia then, becomes a symbol for what is today emblematic, or what Persia is emblematic of, which is the Eastern civilization, which is presently an Islamic civilization. But I have heard from scholars that, we talk about Ishmael in the end of days and Persia in the comments of the sages. These are pretty much synonymous. You're right. The sages, whatever, I won't say they didn't say anything about Ishmael, but Persia and Ishmael in end times prophecies can be seen as synonymous. Now, I said that Pashtun is similar to the Hebrew word pashut, which means plain. And Trey says, plain explains them to a T. They're very humble people. So, okay, and by the way, humility is a Jewish characteristic. The Talmud says there are three characteristics of Jews. It says they are rachmanim, they're merciful. They are baishanim, they are humble. And they are gomle chasadim, they perform acts of kindness. So merciful, humble, and kind are Jewish attributes. So if you have a people that seem to have a humble nature, may well be that they are.
Rabbi, can I ask this?
Not that a person can't be compassionate if he's not Jewish. I'm not saying.
Highly embarrassable too.
Okay, last comment because it's very late.
Quickly, please. Rabbi Dr. Akiva Todd's mentioned this. He's very Kabbalistic. I like him so much. But he had mentioned about that in reference to Abraham's sons that he had with Keturah, which was Hagar, and Abraham sends them off and they become the Eastern religions. And he just mentioned in a sentence that there's like still a strong connection to the Jews because they're Abraham's sons. Okay, thank you. Well,
Okay.
We'll find out one day, right?
I don't have much to comment about it. I don't have much to comment about it. Sorry. In other words, without hearing his comments and what he meant.
Yeah, but China was great taking in Jewish exiles in World War II.
Right.
And the one that gave all those visas.
Japan, by the way, ironically, Japan were allied with the Nazis. They took in Jews and they refused to give them over to the Germans. The Germans said, "We heard Jews came to you, give them to us." Now, there's a story. There's an amazing story. So this group of Jews who had escaped Lithuania, they were given passports by the Japanese consul there, who, by the way, was disgraced by Japan for doing this. His family was disgraced, and I think Israel brought when the state of Israel was formed, they brought this Japanese family to Israel because their family was disgraced in Japan for having helped Jews escape during the father was the Japanese consul in Lithuania, gave passports to hundreds of Jews to escape. Now they escaped to Kobe, Japan. They got passports to go to Japan. So they escaped the Nazis. They traveled through Russia on the railroad, and they got to Japan. They were in Kobe, Japan. Several hundred Jews, Orthodox Jews, and among them was, I believe it was the Amshinov Rebbe, Rebbe Shatzkis, and the Germans were furious at the Japanese, and they said, "Give us your Jews." And so the Japanese, I don't know who, some high official, I don't know if it was the emperor, I don't know who it was. They brought in the Rebbe, who was the leader of this group, and they asked him, "Why do the Nazis hate you so much?" And he said to him, interesting words. He said, "Because we are Asiatic, we are an Asiatic people." He said, "Because we are an Asiatic people." And once he said that, they refused to give the Jews to the Nazis. They said, you can't have them. And the Jews eventually did travel from Japan to Shanghai. And that's where the Jewish community in Shanghai came from. The very famous story, these were the students of the Mir Yeshiva and the Yeshiva Chachmei Lublin that escaped from the Nazis. But this, I can't remember his name, the Japanese consul. Can't remember his name, unfortunately. If you say his name, I'll recognize it. He was disgraced in Japan for having helped the Jews, and he's honored at the Yad Vashem. There's an exhibit honoring him, and I think his family was invited by Israel to come live in Israel, and I think they did come to live in Israel, and they were given great honor there for having saved hundreds. The patriarch of their family saved hundreds of Jews. I'm not sure if he's buried in Israel. I don't remember. He might be buried in Israel, but it's an incredible story. Okay, gotta go. Everyone have a great night.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Bye bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.